Dissector. He's a television producer, independent filmmaker, blogger, and media critic who writes and lectures frequently about the media in the United States worldwide. I strongly suggest anyone who listens to this to see In Debt We Trust. Great movie, one of my favorites of all time. Danny Schechter, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, but you're a little out of date, man. You know, I made a movie since then called Plunder, The Crime of Our Time, which deals with the financial crisis as a crime story. And I've been, doing lots of other projects as well. Anyway, just so keep people up to date, I also do a blog every day at newsdissector.net. And you can follow what I'm writing and what I'm talking about. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, etc.
Alrighty. Well, getting to that point you made, I'm sorry for forgetting about Plunder. I haven't seen it yet. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I've seen interviews with you about that movie. One of the things that you talked about that you just mentioned is that the whole financial crisis, it seemed to be covered more as a business story. As if, these cavalier investors who got in over their head or something, something mundane like that, as opposed to a crime story. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I as I analyzed this, I wasn't really a business person, but I did cover the SNL crisis for ABC News when I worked at 2020. So I was familiar with, fraud and financial fraud as an issue. And it became increasingly clear to me that the massive mortgage ripoffs that are at the heart of this crisis, that have led to millions of foreclosures, that people were talked into mortgages they couldn't afford, that the lending criteria was lowered because these institutions were packaging these mortgages, leveraging them, and selling them as derivative products of various kinds, and then insuring them so that they wouldn't get hurt if the people couldn't pay their mortgages, which they knew they couldn't because they knew that these people, by and large, had no money.
Right.
So it was a scam. The FBI warned of it in 2004. They said fraud is pervasive. Nothing was done about it. The FBI lost a lot of the people in their white-collar crime task forces because of the war against terrorism. And consequence is that this thing, the bubble grew even bigger and, imploded in 2007 and then crashed in 2008. And we're still living with the consequences of that. And we've just seen last week, J.P. Morgan Chase was supposedly the most responsible bank, Jamie Dimon, the most a brilliant leader in the financial sector, losing $2 billion in a bet.
And he keeps his job.
That was crazy.
And he keeps his job. What a great deal. I wish I could lose $2 billion.
Not only did he keep his job, but he got a raise from the shareholders. The Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation. So we'll see what, if anything, they find out. We also learned that our president banks at J.P. Morgan Chase, disclosure, so have I. But he's become a millionaire since he took office. Although it's nothing compared to the report today that Mitt Romney is worth $230 million. So the 1% seems to be firmly in control in our country.
So let me ask you, given that the media has not done its job in reporting such important stories to our lives, like Iraq, WMD, like the financial crisis. You and I, when the last time you and I spoke, we talked a little bit more about the media structure, the current ownership structure of the media, and basically that there once were 50 corporations, now there are 5. Maybe there are really 3. Who knows? Given that structure, given that it's a profit-driven structure, isn't just based on that model, isn't news always going to get short shrift?
Well, it will in this system because the system's not about news. It's about revenues and ratings by and large. I'm just writing a piece about this right now because I got an email from somebody. I've just come out with a new book called Blogathon, which is really a collection of my blogs and writing. And a guy wrote to me and said, basically, you're over the hill, man. he basically said, I'll read it to you. It's an interesting little quote. You'll get the preview of this piece. He says, complaining about the old media is getting more monopolized. Is who cares about old media? He wrote. Nobody in my inner circle under 30. Obviously, there are two grammatical and spelling errors.
It's so disrespectful to his elders.
Nobody watches old media anymore. Well, here's the problem. You can go into the world of Twitter and get, which I am in, and get, kind of a snappy 140 word, tweet. But that doesn't offer you the news, the analysis, and the background that you really need, the context to understand information. So people are getting facts without meaning. Things are coming at us really fast. One day it's one thing, the next day it's not the next. We're breaking news, and it's breaking our concentration, breaking our ability to comprehend what's happening to us.
But aren't there tremendous conflicts of interest with the ownership of the media? I mean,
Yeah, there are conflicts of interest. But look, here's the point. You and I, are interested in these issues, but we also know how to access various perspectives. We know about diverse websites. We know about news media maybe in other countries, Al Jazeera, The Guardian in England, and elsewhere, where you can turn for other information easily and not be dependent on American, big media, Fox News or something like that. But that requires a little bit of work. It requires a little thinking. It requires an effort. And most people don't, quote, have time for it. Why? Because, they're tweeting each other all the time. They're Facebooking with each other.
But isn't that by design? Doesn't our media structure intentionally, for lack of a better term, dumb us down? Isn't that their objective in some ways?
Yeah, I think it does do that. But I think its basic goal is to get your eyeballs, to get your attention span, to get you to pay attention. Because if you listen to the program or watch the show or read the feed, you also will get exposed to the ads. And that's what it's about. It's about selling, not telling. And that's one of the problems here. Being able to develop some sort of an analysis of, that doesn't lead you to a paralysis. A lot of analysis does, which means, you don't do anything about anything. You're just like rushing to the next thing. And, this is a culture of distraction. It's a culture of, whatever the new thing is the most important thing. And, this is the world we're living in. I don't know what to say about it other than I'm trying to keep up with it. I blog, I write, I tweet, I make films. I'm trying to communicate, but it's increasingly difficult. This new book I have, it's like a small publisher. They don't really have the money to promote it. And even if they did, there are hardly any authors on the air anymore on major programs unless they have a conspiracy theory to peddle.
Well, let me ask you on that point. On balance, taking into account the treasure trove of information that everybody has access to with the internet, with social media, with YouTube. We didn't have that 20, 30 years ago. So taking that into account, is the overall media situation better now than it was, say, 25 years ago?
I was going to ask you that because a lot of surveys that really survey Americans, let's say compare what we know about what's happening in the world with what other people in other countries know about what's happening in the world. We don't know very much. In fact, we're at quite a disadvantage. We're the most propagandized people on earth. We don't have tools to really comprehend a lot of things, and our political choices reflect that. That's why all of this is quite functional. And now we're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars dumped on our heads selling various political personalities and candidates. And this is, unfortunately, the media has become an enemy of democracy, not a supporter of democracy.
Well, let me ask you, excuse me, we talked about last time celebrity journalism and that, at least in my opinion, not so fine fellow named Geraldo Rivera. I mean, let me ask you, with people like Katie Couric and Brian Williams just getting paid astronomical sums of money, basically just to read teleprompters. I mean, they are smart people, but
It's not quite true. These people have been in the industry for a long time. They see themselves as professionals. They're very adept and skilled at packaging stories, packaging themselves. And they've built audiences. They have a brand. It's about branding. They have an identity, in the media. People turn to them because they think that they are, the people to watch or the people who know the most.
Right.
We had Walter Cronkite was, kind of an old veteran news guy who became an anchor, but that era is over. And there's a lot of competition to establish a presence, to get attention and all the rest of it. And they do it by taking on topics that they think people will watch. An interview with Alan Jones, as scintillating as it would be, as important as it would be, is unlikely to go prime time on any network anytime soon. And ditto for an interview with me, even though I worked in the media. What I find is that the networks that I work for, CNN, ABC, CNBC, they're not interested in what I have to say, maybe because they know what I have to say. But, I get on Russia Today or Al Jazeera or Press TV a lot more than I get on American networks. And there's a reason for that.
Well, let me ask you, having worked in the media realm, having worked with these people, having known them personally in your professional lives, you don't live inside their heads, but do you think, for example, Katie Couric, obviously she has to toe the line. She works for a large conglomerate. How do you think these highly paid media personalities see themselves? Do they see themselves as being journalists, or do they see themselves as just being celebrities?
Many do, but we're in a post-journalism era, okay? If you're a talk show host, that's a different role from being a reporter. You're presenting information and guests and the like. That's not the same as going out in the streets covering a story. And, people have very short attention spans. When you work in the media, you're often doing more than one thing, many different things at the same time. It's hard to concentrate and focus on the work. You don't have the researchers you once have. You go to Google like everybody else. You're not in a environment that really values ideas and analysis. And as a consequence, you play to the audience. You're hired to do a job, which is to get numbers, ultimately for advertisers, and that's what you do. Syndicated, and you make more money when more people watch. That's the reality. That's the business.
Right.
Some good information come out in that business? Yes. There's a lot of crap come out? Yes. We tell the difference between one and the other? Hopefully. And that's really what our challenge is. And even you're calling me, you want to do a talk with me, but I'm real crazy busy. I'm doing 3 different projects. I've just had a book come out. I'm writing my blog every day. I'm not sure I'm having much of an impact, but I'm trying as best I can. Maybe there are some people who are paying attention. I appreciate your willingness to talk to me, and I'm taking time to do it. But we only have 2 more minutes before I have to run.
Okay. Well, I just have one more question for you. I wanted to, and this is very, very important to me. I wanted to ask you about what's happening in Chicago with regards to the upcoming NATO summit. Now, as you probably are aware, there has been just a tremendous militarization of the streets of Chicago. Thousands of police cordoned off whole sections of the city. And, it seems very circumspect to me because they could have chosen a million different locations. That they're choosing the city from which President Obama is from, of which his former chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, is the mayor.
Right.
What's going on here?
That brings money into the city. It brings attention to the city. Of course, the Democrats are afraid of the 1968 precedent of more confrontations with the police. So the police are now, in a way, wearing normal clothes. They've gone through a lot of charm training, to try to ensure that there's no confrontation. My hunch is that there'll be confrontation. There have been about 8 people arrested so far. There'll be more.
Aren't they setting up the stage for confrontation? I mean, shutting down whole parts of town, putting officers in riot gear. Aren't they setting the stage for confrontation? Isn't that the whole goal?
Look, it's the New York City police. We had the biggest demonstration ever in the history of the world before the Iraq War. New York City was 1 million people, but it was all very well cordoned off, metal pens, separating the demonstrators and all the rest of it, and containing. So what made the news was a couple of people running into a police horse in Times Square and breaking a window. The issues of the demonstration were not really covered in any detail. And I was there. I reported on it at the time. So, this is the reality that we're in. Will they cover this? Will we learn any more about NATO, why people are against NATO, why they're upset about all of this? Probably not. Why, for example, Putin isn't coming because of all the strategic defense initiative, to basically threaten Russia, with missiles and the rest of it in the name of protecting Russia from Iran, which is, preposterous. At any rate.
So I appreciate you with your time. You've been very gracious. That was Danny Schechter, the News Dissector. Thank you very much, Danny.
And bye-bye, and thank you for having me.